Hello, welcome to Behind the Wall. I'm Stan Grant. It was budget week in Canberra, an opportunity for the government to outline its agenda for the year ahead. But relations with our biggest trading partner are at a low not seen for some time, a fact which has the potential to impact our recovery from the coronavirus recession. James Laurenceson is the director of the Australia-China Relations Institute at the University of Technology, Sydney, and he joins me now. James, good to have you with us. I want to look at the budget and of course, the name that was not mentioned, and that is China. Is it extraordinary to you that we can set out our budget forecast, we can talk about returning to economic growth and emerging from recession and not mention our biggest trading partner?
What was extraordinary to me, Stan, was, as you said, China by name was not mentioned, but its impact was plainly evident. The budget received a $20 billion boost because of Chinese demand for Australian iron ore. To put that in perspective, that is 5 times the increase in the defence budget over the past year. So this gets at the complexity too, because this idea that less trade with China and will somehow make us safe is plainly wrong. That trade not only funds health, education and so on, but it even funds defence as well.
And let me just flip that, James, because you're right. While China wasn't mentioned by name, there was an inference. And the other inference was that China is making the world more dangerous and our world more uncertain. Given the hold that China has over our economy as our biggest trading partner, given how important it is to our export markets, and given how many jobs rely on exports, does that then not conversely give China an enormous power over us that it can use against us?
That's the common view, Stan. And look, it's not entirely incorrect. But here's another interesting thing in the budget papers and in the economic data is over the last year, despite the monumental political dispute that Australia and China are having, our total exports to China actually fell by less than 1%. To all other countries, they fell by more than 5%. Now, that's because there's some strong economic factors that are underpinning the Australia-China relationship. And in particular, China wants and needs our iron ore. So look, yes, there are some goods where China can substitute away from Australian products, and lobster fishers and wine growers know all about that. Their pain is real. But at least at the macroeconomic level, things continue to hold up because of iron ore.
And that's interesting, James. Does that then suggest to you that the fundamentals of this trade relationship overwhelmingly can survive what we see as this new Cold War, the heated rhetoric, the drums of war references that we're hearing so much more of now?
It does get at an extraordinary complementarity between the Australian and Chinese economies, Stan. But I think we are at the point now where we have to recognise that the pain is real as well. As I said, the totals may be holding it up, but if you're a lobster fisher or a wine grower, then your bank balance is hurting badly now. Your employees are suffering and those local communities are suffering too. So essentially what's happening is that some pockets of the country are taking one for the team. And I'm not so sure they're being supported very well by Canberra right at this moment.
James, we talk a lot about China, but of course China alone is not just changing the geopolitical and geoeconomic landscape. There are other countries as well. I looked recently at what the IMF identifies as the 5 countries that contribute to half of all global growth. And they include China and Brazil and Indonesia and India and Russia. Not countries I would say that immediately spring to mind in Australia, and not countries we hear talked about a lot when it comes to the economy. Are we seeing a fundamental shift in the world where these previously emerging economies are now gathering more strength, and that's going to flow through to things like not just international trade, but international diplomacy, geostrategic and geopolitics as well?
Stan, the facts and evidence say we are experiencing a fundamental shift, and I think the statistics on global growth that you just cited make that point very convincingly. Unfortunately, what I worry about is in Australia, we still are yet to admit that. In fact, when we talk about our foreign policy these days and responding to China, the countries we immediately reach out to try and grasp for are our Five Eyes Anglophone friends, the US, the UK, New Zealand and Canada. But Stan, you and I know that's not where growth in the world economy is coming from now. And with economic power comes some strategic weight as well.
James, given the heated rhetoric that we're seeing and given this increasing tension with China, and not just all one way, of course, because we know that China also has been much more aggressive, assertive, even belligerent in recent years, does that make it more difficult for people like yourself who like to approach this with perhaps a more nuanced perspective, try to inject some balance, try to look at both sides of the ledger? Do you feel it is more difficult to prosecute that case when we are in a new sort of Cold War environment, if you like?
Stan, I'm a boring academic, but here's what's happened to me over the last 6 months. I've had death threats levelled at me. I've had defamation threats. I've had pressure campaigns, social media campaigns attacking my peer-reviewed academic publications, pressuring publishers to remove them. So this is an extraordinary environment we're in. And I think it comes from the language at the top. Scott Morrison says that on foreign policy, we must speak with one voice. We now have new laws that allows the foreign minister to define the national interest and the foreign policy that's consistent with that, and tear up any agreements between universities and state governments and foreign countries that she doesn't agree with. In other words, there's now in Australia a correct line on China. Now, that sounds an awful lot like the Chinese Communist Party's approach to me. But what it does mean is when someone like myself or you voice some views that are different to the correct line, then now you can be accused of being a traitor and selling out to your country. That's the McCarthyist environment we're now in.
When you talk about those threats, where are they coming from, James?
Some are anonymous emails that are showing up. Some of them, I mean, I can't really get into the legal matters, but they're actually well known. They're not just affecting me, by the way. They're affecting a number of civic society members too. And, you know, it is somewhat ironic because we do worry, rightly, about the Chinese Communist Party cutting the scope for free speech in this country. But what we're seeing now is threats to freedom of speech coming from the Chinese Communist Party's fiercest critics. I'll leave you to ponder what that means.
Just finally, does that then change the way that you approach this? Do you check your words? Do you self-censor? Do you think what impact this is going to have, given some of the response that you're receiving right now?
Yeah, all of the above, Stan. So I'm not someone who wants to run and hide in a corner. I see these threats to freedom of speech, whether they're coming from the Chinese Communist Party or its fiercest critics, as bullying threats. So no, I'm not inclined to back down, but it certainly makes every day a pretty tough slog.
Well, a pleasure to have you on the program and sharing your very forthright and honest views with us today, James. Appreciate it. Thank you again.
Cheers, Stan.